In the year 1957, Gold Coast, a West African colony, was able to do what no other sub-Saharan African country has done yet, by kicking out the British and being the first African country to gain independence. The man who led the charge in all this was none other than the legendary Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. But before Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, before 1957, before the Gold Coast, the name Ghana had already existed in the past. The Gold Coast was a part of the old Ghana Empire, also known as Ouagadougou in West Africa. It included modern-day Mali, Mauritania, and some regions of Senegal during the 4th to 13th century. Its capital was called Kumbisale, and it was not located in the same modern-day Ghana. The old Ghana Empire was a really powerful empire and known for its wealth because of the abundance of gold it was blessed with. It was known for trading gold, and it had a very strong central government and a really strong army. The rulers of the empire were called Ghana. The word Ghana is believed to mean warrior king. Some historians also say it means king of gold. The empire was called Ghana because its enemies and allies started referring to the region Ghana, due to the people of the region calling their rulers that. During the 11th century, the old Ghana Empire began to lose its power and influence, and eventually fell apart due to the Mali Empire led by Sundiata Keita invading, conquering, and taking control of the region in the 13th century. After it was conquered, most of the tribes which practiced the African traditional religion didn't like the new ruler because they were being forced into a new culture and they didn't want to change their religion and culture to a new one, which was the Islamic religion and culture. Most of the old Ghana Empire settlers, mostly Akans, decided to migrate to a new settlement and then came to settle at the new region which became the Gold Coast. Fast forward, in the year 1471, the Portuguese became the first European country to discover the Gold Coast, which was blessed with abundance of gold, and they, being overwhelmed with that sort of riches in gold, initially decided to name the region Mina, which means mines. The Portuguese came to meet different kingdoms and clans on the land, which were in charge of the vast deposits of gold. They traded with and conquered some of the smaller clans and took control. They later came to settle permanently on the continent in the year 1483, so they could be able to expand their trading activities. Then, they later changed the name from Mina, which means mines, to the Gold Coast because of the abundance of gold which were found particularly in between two rivers, which were River Ancobra and River Volta. The Portuguese now began to trade with the bigger and well-established kingdoms such as the Ashanti Kingdom, during which they would trade European goods such as mirrors, guns, metal knives, beads, etc. to the people of the Gold Coast, and in return get gold and also slaves. The news of the successful trade of the Portuguese and how they were acquiring a lot of gold and slaves spread quickly to the other European countries, and soon after, the Dutch, Danish, Swedish, and British people also came to the continent to also trade. This was the time where European countries began to explore the region and engage in slave trade. Soon, they began to send slaves to the Caribbean and the Americas, and they became heavily involved in the slave trade. A royal trading company was then established in 1752 by the British, which still included the other European countries, but the British later bought the part of the Gold Coast which belonged to the Dutch and Danish, and began to own all of the Gold Coast to themselves, which included Fort Elmina, now known as Elmina Castle, which was built by the Portuguese and was the first post for trading built in the Gold Coast. In 1844, the agreement which officially put most of the Gold Coast under British colonial rule was signed. This was the Bond of 1844. This bond was signed between the Fanti chiefs and the British, represented by Commander Henry Wolseley Hill at Formina Adanse on Fanti land. This agreement was to ensure that murders, robberies, and some other crimes committed will be tried by the British judicial system together with some of the Fanti chiefs. But the British took this as an advantage to extend their influence and rule over the region and also protect their interests. During this time, the Asantis kept attacking the Fantis and were only trading with the Dutch and Danes. So to the Fantis, They saw this bond as a way to get protection from the British against the Asantes, who were much superior. This bond led to the British eventually colonizing and ruling the entire Gold Coast. After the agreement was signed and the Fanti lands went under British rule, the British then went on to expand their territories by conquering bigger and stronger kingdoms, including the Ashanti Kingdom. The Ashanti Kingdom had controlled most of the Gold Coast, which wasn't occupied by the British, and they were often in conflict with the British, who were often backed by the Fantis and fought several wars known as the Four Anglo-Ashanti Wars, which led to the defeat of the Ashanti Kingdom eventually and colonization of the entire Gold Coast. The fourth and final war, which led to the conquering of the Ashanti Kingdom, lasted from 1895 to 1896. After the Ashantis had been under the rule of the British for some time, there was a fifth war, which was an uprising by the Ashantis against the British, popularly known as the Yaa Asantewaa War, fought in 1900. This war was led by a female Ashanti warrior known as Yaa Asantewaa. She led the Ashanti Army rebellion against the British, and it was the war over the Golden Stool which the British were once again able to defeat and kept suppressing the entire Ashanti Kingdom. The complete colonization of the Gold Coast by the British started from 1901 and it lasted for about 98 years. The British successfully colonized the entire Gold Coast smoothly with an autocratic way of ruling and governance. They had total control, and the people of the Gold Coast had no say at all in the governance of their own land and own people. And it continued like that until the 1940s, when the great Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah came into the picture. In 1947, Kwame Nkrumah had just returned back home to the Gold Coast after traveling to further his education first in the U.S. Lincoln University and University of Pennsylvania. After that, he went to the UK to the London School of Economics. Nkrumah wasn't just highly educated and brilliant, but was also passionate about his roots and Africa as a whole, wanting to free his people from colonial rule and uniting Africa. Nkrumah's Pan-Africanism was inspired by the likes of his mentors, Dr. Aggrey, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Nigeria's first ever president, W.E. Du Bois, and Marcus Garvey, who was a Jamaican political activist. Upon returning to the Gold Coast in 1947, he joined the United Gold Coast Convention, also known as UGCC, which was a political party made up of the local Gold Coast black elites such as Pa Grant, Akua and the likes. While the United Gold Coast Convention were just trying to seek constitutional reforms from the British colonial rule and not really seeking independence for the Gold Coast, Nkrumah, on the other hand, being a visionary and a Pan-Africanist, had a different agenda, which was to seek independence from the colonial master entirely. A year after Nkrumah had returned back to the Gold Coast and joined the UGCC in 1948 as their General Secretary, he began to feel the UGCC were much more reluctant on completely freeing its people from colonial rule, but rather focused on making structural reforms in the governance of the people. It was inevitable that there would soon be a clash between the UGCC and Nkrumah. While the UGCC pushed their agenda through strategic elite politics, Nkrumah resorted to the mass mobilization of people and using boycotts, non-violent protests, strikes, etc. He strategically planned his first move that would put him a step ahead towards freedom. He secretly planned a meeting with some World War II veterans of the Gold Coast who had returned back home to the Gold Coast and were having troubles getting employment. They felt the colonial government wasn't doing anything to help them with the issue they were facing. In 1948, during this meeting with the ex-servicemen, a protest march will be had by the ex-servicemen was planned. During the march, they would present a petition to the colonial governor called Gerald Creasy. On the day of the protest, 3 ex-servicemen were gunned down while protesting, and that agitated the people of the Gold Coast, and there was a massive riot which spread across the whole colony. The 6 leaders of the UGCC were soon arrested after the incident, including Nkrumah, and were put in prison. These 6 are known as the Big Six. After their arrest, the UGCC leaders were angered by the riots, leading to their arrest and blamed Nkrumah for inciting the protests and the riots that caused their arrest. The UGCC began to distance themselves from Nkrumah, and Nkrumah, on the other hand, viewed the agitation of the people as the people were ready for change and independence. Nkrumah's revolution had begun. Nkrumah and the UGCC were all later released from prison that year. Soon in the following year, 1949, Nkrumah finally established his own political party called the Convention People's Party, also known as CPP. After breaking away from the UGCC and having masses of the people behind him and supporting his movement for self-governance now, he mobilized mass protests by using trade unions, youth and women's groups, and the use of strike and positive action. In 1950, Nkrumah was arrested and jailed by the British for inciting these mass protests, boycotts, and strikes by the people of the colony. While in prison, his popularity even grew bigger, and in 1951, the British organized elections, which Nkrumah and the CPP won by a big margin while he was still in prison. He was later released by the British and became the leader of government business, which is just a step below the prime minister position. He kept pushing for even more power from the British colonial government by putting even more pressure on them for complete self-governance, using his mass support. In following elections in 1954 and 1956, the CPP won the strong majority of the government. The British, realizing there was nothing they could really do anymore about the situation, they handed complete control to Nkrumah and the CPP. Finally, on 6th March 1957, Nkrumah stood in front of a massive crowd of the people of the Gold Coast and announced the gaining of independence from colonial rule to them, saying, and I quote, "At long last, the battle has ended. Ghana, your beloved country, is free forever." He changed the name from the Gold Coast to Ghana, signifying the rich and powerful heritage it had during the time it was a part of the old Ghana Empire. It was a way to connect modern Africans and Ghanaians to their rich pre-colonial heritage. Later in 1960, after Nkrumah had launched major industrial and educational reforms, built roads, schools, the Akosombo Dam, and other important facilities, he declared Ghana a republic and became the first ever president of Ghana.